I now look to Rory Stewart MP to close the case for the proposition.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, honourable members, it is a very, very great and moving privilege for me to be back here. I actually find this whole event rather sort of romantic and disturbing. I remember sitting as an undergraduate somewhere back there, where John Simpson is currently sitting. And I thought I was really cool. I turned up without a jacket on, and I tried to ask a question to Tam Dalyell, one of the great radical Labour MPs, who was standing where Andrew Adonis is currently standing. And he stood up and he roared back, "Put your coat on or I will not speak to you," right? Which shows how much society has changed since I sit here. Look, this has been an extraordinary debate, and I also have one more thanks to the whole union, which is that there is something rather lovely in a debate which could be incredibly toxic, incredibly polarizing, where people are predicting civil war on the streets, to see distinguished politicians like Andrew Adonis and Nigel Farage giving up their Friday evening to come with such civility to listen to each other and to engage with everybody in this debate, and indeed to see John Simpson here too. So it makes me very proud, in fact, to the way that we conduct our politics. It's also been for me one of the great political educations of my life, this whole experience, because I'd lazily sort of assumed before I turned up that Nigel Farage and Andrew Adonis were somehow two opposite poles, right? That they're kind of yin and yang, the man with the striped socks and the man with a striped shirt. All right. Instead of which, I actually realized, the more I think about it, that despite the superficial differences that divide them on the issue of the European Union, they in fact are the same person. They're not so much yin and yang, they're kind of Laurel and Hardy. And I've been reflecting on this a little bit recently. It's actually, it's a question for you all. Which one of these two, for example, do you think it was who said that the Financial Times was far too prejudiced on Brexit because it was owned by the Japanese? Oh no, it's Andrew Adonis, right? Right? And in fact, actually, I think these two are actually learning from each other. It was Andrew who first stood up and suggested that Theresa May's approach to the deal was similar to appeasing in the 1930s. But since then, it has been Nigel Farage who has referred to her as Theresa the Appeaser. It was UKIP who first produced in Wales, in fact, the idea that she was Chamberlain. But I noticed only this week, Andrew Adonis is now comparing her to Neville Chamberlain. And indeed, the presence of John Simpson reminds me of another wonderful parallelism between these two individuals, which is, of course, in their relationship to the BBC. I'm not sure whether it was Nigel Farage who learned from Andrew Adonis or Andrew Adonis who learned from Nigel Farage, but you will have noticed that one of them refers to our distinguished broadcaster as the Brexit Broadcasting Corporation, and the other refers to it as the Brussels Broadcasting Corporation. This is an incredibly exciting debate at an incredibly exciting time. And actually, as somebody who's been different forms of public servant all my life, briefly in the army, in the Foreign Office, setting up a charity, working in Iraq and Afghanistan, and being different types of minister in government, I can honestly say I have never been at a time in British politics where I have felt so moved or so excited. Curiously, though, I would have thought, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, that I would have found myself sitting with one of these two people, right? That either some romantic inspiration would have led me to be a great buccaneering Brexiteer like Nigel, or 20 years working in international relations and in the Foreign Office would have led me to be an arch Remainer like Andrew Adonis. But curiously, I've discovered, and this is something that I believe is true, that in the end, what makes this such an exciting moment in politics is because it's an opportunity to argue passionately for moderation, passionately for realism, and for the realism and compromise without which idealism is impossible. Now, these two individuals have the most wonderful siren songs. And what a lovely story they tell. For both of them, the British people are these victims in this terrible Stygian gloom. And there are people to blame. Cowardly, incompetent politicians. Me, right? Me, I'm to blame, right? And there is a sunlit upland to which everybody can be led by these heroic messiahs. Them, right? Okay? There is, however, a slight problem with their view of the world. And this is something that I feel very, very deeply. It is a lack of realism, a lack of ability to engage with who this country is, what this country is, and what we can be. Both of them claim to speak for the will of the British people. Both of them are in denial of a central fact, which was the country is divided almost evenly, straight down the middle, between people who voted for Brexit and people who voted for Remain. Both of them characteristically fail to display an empathy for those who voted in the other direction. They're very quick, if you're on the Remain side, many of you in this room will be on the Remain side, very quick to explain why people voted for Brexit. Very reluctant to consider that some of the people might have voted for Remain for the very same reasons that you're suggesting people voted for Brexit. But there's a deeper reason that I'm worried about the position that they take. It is because they have a false vision of the future. They are the wrong kind of prophet. They are false prophets. What do I mean by that? Well, a great deal has been done already by my two distinguished colleagues here, in fact, my three distinguished colleagues here, in pointing out some of the flaws of what Nigel will argue for, which is effectively a no-deal Brexit. And I'm not going to take any more of your time in arguing against that, because I imagine the majority of you in this room can also see the economic dangers and risks of a no-deal Brexit. The danger, in fact, that it wouldn't just be a no-deal, but a never deal. That it would be very difficult to come out of that deal to any future deal with Europe or the United States. But what you haven't perhaps taken on quite as exactly is the dangers of what Andrew Adonis is proposing. What it would feel like, even were he to hold a second referendum, even were he to win that referendum, 52-48, or 53-47 but on a lower turnout, or 54-46 but allowing 16-year-olds and European citizens to vote, and then to re-enter the European Union. What kind of soft power would Britain have in the European Union in that kind of situation? The calls for a third referendum would be taking place on the street immediately. We would limp back into the European Union, not in the way that Andrew imagines, trying to join the euro, trying to embrace Schengen. Instead, we would be as ambivalent as we were before and struggling with a sense of insecurity on our streets. But the final reason I'm worried about their view is that it's polarizing. It's not just that they express difference, but in a very dangerous sense, they intensify difference. Andrew has gone on the record saying, and I quote, "British politics for the next generation will divide into those who resisted Brexit and those who promoted or appeased it. I will never fully respect or trust anyone who wasn't in the resistance from the beginning." This is false politics. These men are not Democrats, they are faux Democrats. For one of them, the idea of democracy is the people and the pint. For the other, the idea of democracy is Nuffield College and utilitarian calculations. But observe what they really think. On the one hand, of a referendum, a democratic referendum, and on the other hand, of the view of a democratically elected parliament. And consider that their great hero, because they both speak about him a great deal, Churchill, represented exactly somebody who understood the necessity for compromise, the messiness of politics, the importance of realism in everything that he did. You here are the future. You here are going to take this country forward, and to do it, you need a platform. You need stability. You do not need to spend the next 10 years of your life listening to this siren song. Whatever you want to do on immigration, on climate change, on development in Africa, you require moderation, you require compromise, and ultimately you require realism. And what you will learn through supporting this deal is that if you may not always be able to do what these people pretend, we can do much, much more than we fear. Thank you very much and good night.